She swore she would never let anyone into her heart again, until an unexpected glance changed everything. Between chance encounters, silent gestures, and decisions that defied destiny, a romance was born capable of facing judgments and sacrifices. Prepare to live every emotion of this story. Subscribe, like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. She swore never to surrender again. He had the world in his hands, but didn't know how to reach her heart. The afternoon was sultry, the salty sea breeze entering through the open window of the cafe. The sound of cutlery and conversations mixed with the intense aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Emily felt her heart racing, her hands restless in her lap. Mark, her ex-boyfriend, was leaning against the counter, smiling with the same confidence he always used to control her. It was the last straw. "It's over, Mark. For real," Emily said quietly, but with enough firmness for him to catch every syllable. "You always come back," he replied, approaching with that smile that now seemed like a threat to her. "It's just a matter of time." It was at that instant that his gaze, the most reserved billionaire in town, crossed hers. Gabriel Torres observed the scene discreetly from his table in the corner. There was no arrogance in his eyes, only a calm curiosity and an almost painful perception that something was wrong. "I need you to understand that there's no more us." Emily stood up, feeling Gabriel's gaze like strange support. "This time it's definitive." "Like the other 5 times?" Mark laughed too loud, making some heads turn. Emily felt her face burn. Her past seemed like a prison from which she couldn't escape. In that coastal town where everyone knew everyone's business, her story with Mark was like a public soap opera that people had been following for years. Gabriel stood up slowly, as if not wanting to draw attention, but his movement was calculated to create a distraction. The cup he was holding purposefully slipped from his hands, shattering on the floor and spilling coffee everywhere. "I'm sorry," he said politely, while the barista and a waitress rushed to clean up the mess. The commotion was enough for Mark to take a step back, irritated by the interruption. Emily took advantage of the moment to grab her purse and head for the door, escaping before Mark could stop her. Outside, she breathed deeply, feeling the humid sea air fill her lungs. The cobblestone streets of Seal Harbor gleamed under the golden late-afternoon sun. She didn't notice when Gabriel came out right behind her. "Is he always so insistent?" The deep, calm voice surprised her. Emily turned around, facing that man everyone knew, but few really knew anything about. Gabriel Torres, heir to a fortune in real estate ventures and owner of half the luxury hotels on the coast. There was something in his gaze that didn't match the image of an indifferent magnate that the town had built. "Sorry, I didn't want to intrude," he added in the face of her silence. "You didn't intrude," Emily finally replied. "Actually, thank you for the timely distraction. It was a pleasure to break one of my imported cups." He smiled for the first time, and Emily noticed how that smile transformed his usually serious face. "You're Gabriel Torres," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. "And you are?" Emily Matthews, the owner of the restoration studio on Shell Street." "Ah, yes, that place with the blue door and French windows." Emily raised her eyebrows, surprised that he knew this detail. "I pass by there every morning," he explained, as if reading her thoughts. "I like the longer route to the office." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the sounds of the city. The church bell tolling at 5 o'clock, the distant sound of waves, the call of a fresh fish vendor. "Well, thank you again," she said, adjusting the strap of her purse on her shoulder. "I have to go." "Emily," he called when she had already taken a few steps. "The Sea Festival starts this weekend." "Yes, I know, like every year." "Will you be there?" She hesitated for a moment. The Sea Festival was the most important celebration in Seal Harbor, marking the end of summer. Everyone would be there, including Mark. "Probably," she finally replied. "Maybe we'll run into each other there then," Gabriel said with a formality that contrasted with the gleam in his eyes. Emily just nodded and went on her way, aware of his gaze on her back. Something had changed in that moment, as if the city's air carried a new promise. However, she had already learned not to trust promises. The last weekend of summer arrived, bringing with it the traditional Sea Festival. The narrow streets of Seal Harbor were decorated with blue and white flags. The smell of grilled fish and typical sweets filled the air. Music came from every corner, and colorful stalls occupied the central square and extended to the waterfront. Emily walked through the crowd, wearing a light cotton dress that danced in the wind. Her brown hair was tied in an unpretentious bun, with some loose strands framing her face. She carried a small handmade purse that she had made herself, where she kept only the essentials: keys, red lipstick, and enough money to buy treats at the stalls. She greeted acquaintances with polite smiles, but kept distance from long conversations. 6 years living in Seal Harbor, and she still felt, in part, like an outsider. Maybe because she had never completely surrendered to the town's rhythm, always keeping one foot back, always observing before participating. It was when she spotted Mark approaching, surrounded by friends, that her body stiffened. He saw her and smiled. That smile that for years made her forgive betrayals and lies. That smile that now only awakened in Emily an immense desire to flee. "Hello, Emily." His voice sounded loud, forcing her to stop. "Alone as always." His friends laughed, and Emily felt her stomach sink. She was about to respond when she felt a presence beside her and an arm being offered to her, as if they were old acquaintances. "Actually, she's with me," Gabriel said naturally without looking at Mark. "Sorry for being late." Emily hesitated for only a second before accepting the offered arm, as if she really had been waiting for him. She felt the firmness of his muscles under the thin fabric of the white shirt he wore. "Torres," Mark greeted, visibly disconcerted. "I didn't know you two knew each other." "There are many things you don't know," Gabriel replied with a polite smile, but his gaze was icy. "Shall we go, Emily? The boat presentation is about to start." Without waiting for Mark's response, Gabriel guided Emily away, maintaining a calm pace, as if they were really going to see the decorated boats that paraded through the sea that night. "Thank you," she murmured when they were at a safe distance. "It seems we're developing a pattern." "What pattern would that be?" he asked, still keeping her arm linked to his. "You saving me from uncomfortable situations." Gabriel stopped, turning to face her. The town fountain sparkled behind him, illuminated by small colored lights, creating an almost magical outline around him. "Maybe I'm just in the right place, at the right time," he said, with a seriousness that contrasted with the lightness of the festival around them. "Or maybe it's destiny." Emily laughed, a crystalline sound that seemed to surprise them both. "You don't seem like the type of man who believes in destiny." "And what type of man do I seem like?" he asked, genuinely curious. "The type who calculates every step, who doesn't leave anything to chance." Gabriel smiled, and Emily noticed how his eyes lit up when he did. "Maybe you're right," he admitted. "But there are things that even I can't control." The sound of fireworks exploding in the sky interrupted the conversation. Both looked up, seeing colors spread like luminous flowers over the dark sea. Emily's face lit up with the spectacle, and Gabriel realized he preferred watching her to looking at the sky. "It's beautiful," she commented, still with eyes fixed on the lights. "Yes," he replied without taking his gaze off her. "It's beautiful." When the fireworks ended, Emily realized they were still arm in arm, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Gently, she freed herself, feeling a strange sensation of loss as she did so. "I think it's time to go," she said without really wanting to leave. "May I walk you home?" Emily hesitated. There was something about him that intrigued her, that made her want to stay. But years of disappointments had built walls around her heart. "You don't need to," she finally replied. "I live close by." "Then I'll respect your decision," Gabriel said, without insisting. "But I'd like to see you again, Emily." There was a sincerity in his voice that disarmed her. "Why?" the question escaped before she could contain it. Gabriel seemed to carefully consider his response before speaking. "Because you're the first person in this town who doesn't look at me as if I were just the money I have," he finally said. "And that's refreshing." Emily felt her face heat up but kept her gaze steady on his. "Good night, Gabriel," she said, taking a step back. "Good night, Emily," he replied, watching her disappear into the crowd. What neither of them noticed was Mark's spiteful look, who watched the scene from afar, with a beer glass in his hand and revenge plans forming in his mind. The following weeks brought a new routine to Emily's life. Gabriel began appearing casually in places where she used to be, at the bakery where she bought bread every morning, at the fruit market on Saturdays, and occasionally at the cafe near her studio. Their encounters were brief, never planned, at least not officially, but increasingly frequent. Short conversations turned into long walks along the beach at sunset, where they talked about books, movies, and gradually about themselves. "I grew up in that house." Gabriel pointed to a beachfront mansion with an impeccable garden and large glass windows. "It looks more like a museum than a home, doesn't it?" Emily observed the imposing construction, trying to imagine the boy Gabriel had been, running through those two empty corridors. "And your parents?" she asked carefully. "My father lives in Milan now. My mother passed away when I was 12. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago," he said, looking at the horizon. "And you? Your family isn't from here, right?" Emily kicked a shell in the sand before answering. "I'm from Boston. I came here 6 years ago after I finished art school. I needed a fresh start." "A fresh start?" She hesitated, but something in the way Gabriel looked at her, without judgment, only genuine interest, made her continue. "I ended a complicated relationship there. I thought changing cities would help turn the page, and then you met Mark," Gabriel completed. "Yes," she sighed. "I fell into the same pattern, just in a different setting." They walked in silence for a few minutes, only the sound of waves filling the space between them. "You know what I learned managing businesses?" Gabriel finally said. "That patterns only repeat when we don't learn the lesson they're trying to teach us." Emily smiled, appreciating the simple but profound wisdom of those words. "And what would be the lesson I still haven't learned?" Gabriel stopped, turning to face her. The wind tousled his dark hair, and his eyes reflected the deep blue of the sea behind her. "Maybe it's the same one I'm trying to learn," he said quietly. "That not everything needs to be controlled. That sometimes you just need to trust." There was a moment, suspended in time, when Emily felt he was going to kiss her. Her heart accelerated, her breathing caught in her throat. But Gabriel just smiled and started walking again, respecting the space she still needed. It was that same week that Emily received Amanda, her best friend and business partner, at the studio, for dinner at her small house near the square. While they prepared the food, Emily found herself talking about Gabriel more than she intended. "So the mysterious billionaire finally fell in love," Amanda teased, cutting tomatoes for the salad. "Don't be ridiculous," Emily protested, feeling her face burn. "We're just friends." "Friends?" Amanda repeated, clearly incredulous. "And that's why you're all flushed just talking about him." Emily threw a napkin at her friend, who laughed loudly. "I'm serious, Emily. I've never seen you like this, not even in the beginning with Mark." The mention of her ex-boyfriend brought a shadow to Emily's face. "It's different," she admitted. "Gabriel is attentive in a way I've never experienced before. He remembers details I mention in conversations, respects when I need silence, and never tries to make me be someone I'm not." "Wow," Amanda whistled softly. "That's quite a compliment coming from you." "But there's a problem," Emily continued, stirring the sauce she was preparing. "I don't know if I'm ready to trust again. And besides, he's Gabriel Torres. Half the town works for him. How can I be sure this isn't just a pastime for someone like him?" Amanda put down the knife and held her friend's hands, forcing her to look into her eyes. "Not all people are like Mark, Emily. You need to give your heart a chance." The dinner continued with lighter conversations, but Amanda's words echoed in Emily's mind for the rest of the night. Maybe it was time to lower her defenses, at least a little. The first major turnaround came on a September morning, when Emily was shopping at the municipal market. An elderly lady, known for spreading gossip around town, approached with a malicious smile. "Emily dear, how are you? I heard about the news." "News?" Emily asked, confused. "Oh, about you and Gabriel Torres. They say you finally found your lottery ticket, didn't you? After Mark, you really deserve someone with money to support your tastes." Emily felt as if she had been slapped. "What are you talking about?" "You don't need to pretend, dear. Everyone knows you're getting close to him out of interest. Mark told everyone at the bar last night. He said you always had that ambition." The world seemed to spin around Emily. Mark was spreading lies about her, turning something that was just beginning to blossom into something dirty and opportunistic. She left the market without buying anything, walking quickly home with tears in her eyes. When she arrived, she found a message from Gabriel on her phone, asking if she'd like to have dinner with him that night. With a heavy heart, she typed a short response. "I can't. I'm busy." And then, taken by an impulse of self-preservation, she blocked his number. In the following days, she avoided all places where Gabriel might be. She changed her routine, taking alternative routes to the studio, buying bread at another bakery, avoiding the beach at hours when they used to meet. Amanda noticed the change immediately. "What happened?" she asked, seeing Emily arrive at the studio with deep dark circles. "You look terrible." Emily told her about the rumors Mark had spread. "And you believed it?" Amanda asked, incredulous. "It's not a matter of believing," Emily replied, concentrating on the porcelain vase she was restoring. "It's a matter of protecting my reputation. Isn't it enough everything I went through with Mark? Now I'll be known as the opportunist who's after Torres's fortune." "Since when do you care what others think?" "Since it affects my business, Amanda. Did you forget that our clients are the same people who frequent this town's social circles? If they believe I'm a gold digger..." "And Gabriel? Does he believe that?" Emily stopped, considering the question. "I don't know. Probably not. But that doesn't matter." "Of course it matters," Amanda exclaimed, exasperated. "You're throwing away something special because of malicious gossip." But Emily had already closed herself off. Those walls she had begun to lower were now higher than ever. Autumn came to Seal Harbor, painting the trees in golden and reddish tones. The sea was more agitated, and mornings began to get colder. The town prepared for the Harvest Festival, a smaller celebration than the Sea Festival, but equally important for the local community. It was in early October that Emily realized Gabriel hadn't given up. He began appearing in the same places she frequented, as if he knew exactly where she would be. At the craft market on Wednesdays, at the fruit fair on Sundays, at the bookstore where she bought her art magazines. He never approached directly, just greeted her with a discreet wave and that smile that made her heart race. He didn't insist on conversations, respecting the space she had imposed. But his constant presence was a clear message. He was there, waiting for her to decide to talk to him again. The Harvest Festival arrived with its stalls of local products, folk music, and the traditional grape dance, where couples danced around baskets of grapes and seasonal fruits. Emily didn't plan to go, but Amanda insisted so much that she ended up giving in. She wore a simple, fine wool dress in burgundy, matching the scarf that protected her neck from the cold wind. "You look beautiful," Amanda commented as they walked through the square decorated with corn stalks and pumpkins. "I bet a certain someone will think the same." "Amanda, please," Emily sighed. "We've already talked about this." "I'm just saying that..." Amanda suddenly stopped, her eyes fixed on something behind Emily. "Speaking of the devil..." Emily turned around and her heart skipped a beat. Gabriel was there, talking to the mayor, wearing a dark coat that highlighted his broad shoulders. As if feeling her gaze, he raised his head and their eyes met across the crowd. "I'm going to get us something to drink," Amanda said, moving away before Emily could protest. The traditional music began to play, and couples were called for the grape dance. Emily took a step back, intending to hide among the spectators, but felt a hand lightly touch her arm. "Dance with me?" Gabriel asked, his voice deep and smooth at the same time. She should say no. She should walk away. But something in those eyes, in the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in that crowded square, made her accept. He led her to the center, where other couples were already forming a circle. Their hands fit together perfectly, and when he placed his other hand on her waist, Emily felt warmth spread throughout her body. "You've been avoiding me," he said as they moved to the rhythm of the music. "Yes," she admitted without looking away. "May I know why?" Emily hesitated. It seemed so childish now, explaining that she had distanced herself because of gossip. "I heard things," she finally said, "about us." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "And since when do you care what others say?" "It's not that simple." The music accelerated, and he spun her gracefully before bringing her back into his arms, now closer than before. "Explain to me then," he asked, his face so close she could feel his breath. "Mark is spreading that I'm getting close to you out of interest," she finally said, feeling her face burn with shame. "That I only want your money." Gabriel let out a short laugh, surprising her. "And you thought I would believe that?" "It's not a matter of you believing. It's a matter of the whole town believing." He spun her again, taking advantage of the movement to pull her even closer. "Emily, look around," he said gently. "Nobody here is paying attention to us. And even if they were, why would that matter?" She had no answer for that. The truth was that she had used the rumors as an excuse to distance herself, when in reality she was afraid. Afraid of surrendering. Afraid of getting hurt again. The music ended, but they remained in the same place, as if they didn't want to break the spell of that moment. "Give me a chance," Gabriel asked, his voice almost a whisper. "A chance to show that what's happening between us is real." Emily felt the walls around her heart tremble. "I need time," she replied honestly. "Time is something I have plenty of," he smiled, finally releasing her hands. "Especially for you." When Amanda returned with the drinks, she found Emily alone, with flushed cheeks and a gleam in her eyes that she hadn't seen in a long time. "It looks like the dance was good," she commented with a mischievous smile. "Shut up," Emily replied, but couldn't hide the smile that insisted on appearing on her lips. What she didn't know was that while they danced, Gabriel had been watched attentively by his parents. Hours later, during a dinner at the Torres mansion, his mother would casually mention that she had found the perfect partner for him, the daughter of an important investor from Boston. The second major turnaround was about to happen. Winter came to Seal Harbor with unusual intensity. Heavy rains lashed the town, and the sea, usually calm, transformed into a furious entity that roared day and night against the rocks. Emily and Gabriel had resumed contact, now more consciously. He would pick her up at the studio at the end of the workday, and together they would walk through the town, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they dined at small restaurants away from curious eyes. Other times they just sat in silence on her porch, watching the rain fall. There was a delicacy in this approach, as if both were stepping on fragile ground, testing limits, discovering boundaries. The touches were subtle, fingers that brushed when passing the salt, an arm offered when crossing a wet street, a quick goodbye hug that always seemed to end too soon. It was on a particularly cold afternoon that Emily received an unexpected visit from Mark. She was alone in the studio, finishing the restoration of an antique clock, when the door opened and he entered, bringing with him the smell of rain and a smile she knew all too well. "What do you want, Mark?" she asked without looking up from her work. "To talk," he replied, approaching the table where she worked. "I miss you." Emily sighed, gently putting down the brush she was using. "We have nothing to talk about. Please leave." "Don't be like that," he insisted, his voice taking on that honeyed tone he used when he wanted something. "I've been thinking a lot about us. I've changed, Emily. Really this time." She finally raised her eyes to face him. "There is no us, Mark, and you haven't changed. You never change. It's because of him, isn't it? Torres." There was bitterness in his voice now. "Do you really think he's interested in you? He's just bored, Emily. Men like him get tired quickly." The words hit her like poisoned arrows, not because she believed them, but because they touched insecurities she hadn't completely overcome yet. "Get out of my studio, now!" "He has a fiancée, you know," Mark said, with malicious satisfaction. "The daughter of Morrison, that investor from Boston. Everyone's talking about it. The engagement dinner will be at the Torres mansion this weekend." Emily felt her blood freeze in her veins. It couldn't be true. Gabriel would have mentioned something like that, wouldn't he? "You're lying," she said, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "Ask him then," Mark smiled, satisfied for having planted doubt. "Or better yet, show up at the dinner and see with your own eyes." After Mark left, Emily remained motionless for long minutes, trying to process what she had heard. Part of her wanted to call Gabriel immediately and demand explanations, but another part, the hurt and cautious part, feared confirmation of her worst suspicions. She decided to wait. If it were true, Gabriel would mention the dinner. If it weren't, well, it would just be another one of Mark's lies. But the days passed, and Gabriel didn't mention any dinner. On Friday, the eve of the supposed event, he invited her for coffee, as he always did. There was something different in his expression, a tension that Emily hadn't noticed before. "Is everything okay?" she asked when they sat at their favorite cafe away from downtown. "Yes," he replied too quickly. "Why wouldn't it be?" "You seem worried." Gabriel took a sip of his coffee before answering. "Problems with an investment, nothing important." Emily felt a pang of disappointment. He was lying, or at least omitting something. She decided to be direct. "Do you have any commitment tomorrow night?" The way he briefly averted his eyes was all the confirmation she needed. Actually, yes, a business dinner at my parents' house. Very boring, believe me. I understand, she said, feeling a knot form in her throat. I hope it's productive. The rest of the meeting took place in a tense atmosphere, with superficial conversations and forced smiles. When they said goodbye, Gabriel hesitated, as if he wanted to say something more, but ended up just giving a quick kiss on her cheek before leaving. Emily walked home under the light rain, letting the water drops mix with the tears that insisted on falling. Mark was right, after all. Gabriel Torres had a planned life, with a suitable fiancée chosen by his family. What was she? A pastime, perhaps. A distraction while the inevitable didn't happen. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, imagining Gabriel next to an elegant woman, probably tall and sophisticated, the type of person who naturally belonged to his world, the daughter of an investor from Boston, someone with the right connections, the right education, the right surname. The next morning, she woke up with swollen eyes and a fierce determination. She would go to the Central Park and sit on the bench near the fountain, her favorite place to think when she was disturbed. The day was cold and cloudy, which kept away the usual park visitors. Perfect for being alone with her thoughts. She put on a thick coat, wrapped a scarf around her neck and left, hugging herself against the cold wind that came from the sea. The park was almost deserted as she expected. She sat on the wooden bench, watching the fountain water dance, forming small rainbows when some rays of sun managed to penetrate the heavy clouds. It was there that Gabriel found her hours later, still sitting, hugging her own coat, her gaze lost in the fountain water. "Emily?" His voice brought her back to reality. "I was looking for you." She raised her eyes, surprised to see him there. He looked tired, with deep, dark circles, as if he had also spent the night awake. "How did you know I would be here?" she asked, her voice coming out colder than she intended. "Amanda told me. I stopped by the studio and she mentioned that you always come here when you're disturbed." Emily made a mental note to reprimand her friend for her intrusion. "What happened?" Gabriel asked, sitting beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "You seem sad." "I'm fine," she lied, staring at the fountain to avoid having to look at him. "I just needed to think." About how stupid I am." The words escaped before she could contain them. "About how I keep falling into the same patterns, trusting the wrong people." Gabriel frowned, clearly confused. "What are you talking about?" Emily took a deep breath, deciding it was time for the truth. "I know about tonight's dinner, Gabriel. It's not just a business dinner, is it? It's an engagement dinner. Your engagement." He visibly paled, and for a moment seemed not to know what to say. "Who told you that?" he finally asked, his voice low. "So it's true," she laughed without humor. "Of course it is. Mark was right after all." "Mark?" Gabriel repeated, his tone changing to something harder. "Was he the one who told you this?" "Does it matter? It's true, isn't it? You're going to marry the daughter of an investor from Boston, a suitable partner for the Torres heir." Gabriel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Things aren't that simple, Emily." "They never are," she replied bitterly, standing up. "Look, you don't owe me explanations. We're nothing to each other after all. It was fun while it lasted." She started to walk away, but Gabriel held her by the arm, stopping her. "Do you really think all this was just fun for me?" There was an intensity in his eyes that made her stop. "That I spent months trying to get close to you out of boredom?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "I just know you omitted something important, something that affects whatever is happening between us." Gabriel released her arm, but remained close, his eyes never leaving hers. "My parents organized this dinner," he explained. "It's true they want to introduce me to Morrison's daughter. They think it would be an advantageous partnership. But it's not an engagement dinner, Emily. I'm not engaged to anyone." She wanted to believe, but years of disappointments had built a wall of skepticism around her heart. "And why didn't you tell me about this?" "Because it doesn't matter," he replied with simplicity. "It doesn't matter who my parents want me to meet, because the only person who interests me is you." Emily felt her heart accelerate but kept her guard up. "You say that now, but what? You think I'll give in to my family's pressure? That I'll marry someone I barely know just because it would be good for business? He took a step forward, eliminating the distance between them. I'm not that kind of man, Emily. I never was. There was such sincerity in his voice that Emily felt her wall of defenses begin to crack. I'm in love with you, Gabriel continued, his words almost a whisper. I think I have been since that first day at the cafe when I saw how you faced your ex with dignity and courage. It was as if time stopped. Emily felt the world around her disappear, leaving only Gabriel and the truth in his eyes. I'm scared, she confessed, her voice trembling. I'm scared to trust again and get hurt. I know, he said softly, bringing a hand to her face, touching her with such delicacy that she could almost believe she was precious. And I promise I'll never give you reasons to fear. In that moment, under the gray winter sky, with the sound of the fountain in the background and the smell of sea salt in the air, Emily did something she hadn't done in a long time. She chose to believe. Not in words, but in the man who said them, in the eyes that hid nothing, in the hands that touched her as if she were made of glass. The dinner, she said, suddenly remembering. What are you going to do? Gabriel smiled, that smile that transformed his face and warmed her heart. I'm going to tell the truth, that I've already found the woman I want to be with, and that it's not negotiable. Emily felt tears return to her eyes, but this time, they were tears of a different emotion, something between relief and happiness. That's going to cause problems for you, she said. Probably, he admitted, still smiling. But it's worth it. When they finally embraced, there in the almost deserted park, with the cold wind blowing around them, Emily felt as if she had found a safe harbor after a long storm. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she was willing to find out. It was that same week that Emily received an email that would change everything. The Museum of Contemporary Art in New York was offering her a position as chief restorer, something she had always dreamed of. It was a unique opportunity, with an excellent salary, and the chance to work with pieces of world historical importance. Amanda was the first to know. "This is incredible," she exclaimed upon reading the email Emily had forwarded. "It's your dream job." They were at the studio, closing for the day. Outside, the rain had given a truce, and the winter sun cast its last golden rays over the town. "I know," Emily replied, organizing her tools meticulously, as she always did. But what? Don't tell me you're hesitating because of Gabriel." Emily sighed, sitting heavily in her chair. "It's not that simple, Amanda. What we have is new, still fragile." "He could go with you," Amanda suggested, but her tone indicated that even she didn't believe that. "Or you could travel on weekends." "You know that wouldn't work. He has the business here, family, responsibilities, and New York is hours away." Amanda approached, holding her friend's hands. "Emily, listen to me. I know how much you care about him, but this is the opportunity you've worked your whole life for. You can't throw this away for a relationship that's barely begun." Emily knew her friend was right. That position was everything she had dreamed of, the recognition of years of hard work and dedication. But the idea of leaving Gabriel behind, now that they had finally found each other, seemed like destiny's cruelty. "I need to think," she finally said. "I have a week to respond." That night, when Gabriel picked her up for dinner, Emily didn't mention the email. She wanted to enjoy the night without shadows, without difficult decisions hovering over them. They went to a small seaside restaurant, where the chef knew Gabriel and prepared special dishes that weren't on the menu. "I have a surprise for you," he said after dessert, his eyes shining with expectation. "What?" she asked, curious. "You'll find out tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 10 a.m. Wear something comfortable." Emily tried to extract more information, but he kept the mystery, changing the subject whenever she insisted. The next morning, Gabriel arrived punctually, driving his own car, a discreet sedan, not the sports car she would imagine someone like him would have. "Where are we going?" she asked as he drove out of town. "Patience," he smiled, glancing at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "Trust me." After about half an hour, they arrived at a secluded property, close to the sea, but far from the bustle of Seal Harbor. It was a simple house, 2 stories, with large windows and a porch that circled the entire construction. The garden, though neglected, was full of wildflowers that danced in the wind. "What is this place?" Emily asked as they got out of the car. "It was my grandparents' summer house," Gabriel explained, taking her hand and leading her to the entrance. "They spent summers here, away from the mansion and all social obligations. When my grandmother died, my grandfather didn't want to come anymore, and then he also passed away. They entered the house, and Emily was immediately enveloped by a feeling of coziness that contrasted with the imposing nature of the Torres mansion. The furniture was simple, but quality, and there were family photographs everywhere. In one of them, a child, Gabriel, smiled next to a white-haired gentleman, both holding freshly caught fish. "My grandfather," Gabriel said, noticing her gaze on the photograph. "The only one who really taught me something that matters." "What did he teach you?" Emily asked, touching the frame delicately. "That the true value of things isn't in the price you pay for them, but in the meaning they have," he replied, his eyes lost in memories. "This house is worth a fraction of what the mansion is worth, but for me, it's infinitely more valuable." Emily smiled, imagining the boy Gabriel had been, running through those rooms, fishing with his grandfather, free from the expectations and pressures that awaited him in adult life. "Why did you bring me here?" she finally asked. Gabriel led her to the back porch, which offered a stunning view of the sea. The sky was exceptionally blue for a winter day, and waves broke gently on the deserted beach below. "I wanted you to know a part of me that few people know," he said, leaning on the railing. "And also because, well, I'm thinking about restoring this place, making it habitable again." "To sell?" Emily asked, confused. Gabriel laughed, shaking his head. "No, to live in. I'm tired of the mansion, of appearances, of everything it represents. I want a place that's really mine, a home." Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. The idea of Gabriel choosing a simpler, more authentic life touched something deep inside her. "It would be quite a project," she commented, already professionally evaluating the house's condition. "The structure seems good, but it would need a lot of work." "And that's where you come in," he smiled, turning to face her. "I know you have an incredible eye for restoration. I thought maybe you could help me." Emily felt her heart tighten. How could she tell him now about the job in New York? How could she destroy this moment? "Gabriel, she began, but the words got stuck in her throat. "What is it?" he asked, noticing her hesitation. "I received a job offer," she finally said, avoiding his eyes, "from the Museum of Contemporary Art in New York, as chief restorer." Gabriel was silent for a moment, and when Emily finally found courage to look at him, she saw not disappointment or anger, but pride. "That's incredible, Emily," he said, holding her hands. "It's an enormous honor. You deserve it." "But," she began, confused by his reaction. "But nothing," he interrupted her gently. "It's your dream job, isn't it? Something you've worked your whole life for." Emily nodded, feeling tears form in her eyes. "It means I'll have to leave Seal Harbor," she said quietly. "Leave the studio, Amanda. You." Gabriel brought her hands to his lips, kissing them softly. "I would never forgive myself if you refused this opportunity because of me," he said seriously. "Some chances appear once in a lifetime, Emily, and you have to grab them when they arise." "But what about us?" she asked, a tear rolling down her face. "We just found each other." "And we'll figure out a way to make it work," he replied with a confidence that surprised her. "New York isn't that far. I can visit you on weekends. You can come here on your days off. And who knows, in the future." He looked around, at the house, at the sea in the distance. "Maybe we can make this place our home, when you're ready." Emily felt as if a weight was lifted from her shoulders. There were no ultimatums, no impossible choices, just understanding, support, and the promise of a future together, even if that future required patience and adaptation. "I love you." The words escaped her lips before she could contain them, surprising them both. Gabriel smiled, that smile that lit up his eyes and warmed her heart. "I love you too, Emily," he replied, pulling her closer. "And that's exactly why I want you to shine, always." When they finally kissed, there on the porch of the old beach house, with the sound of waves as background music, Emily felt that for the first time in her life, she didn't need to choose between love and personal fulfillment. She could have both. even if the path wasn't easy or direct. What she didn't know was that while they were there, sharing plans and dreams, another storm was forming on the horizon. One that would test not only their newly discovered love, but also the values and principles they both claimed to defend. Spring came to Seal Harbor, painting the town with vibrant colors. Trees bloomed, birds returned from their migrations, and the sea, previously agitated by winter, returned to display its characteristic turquoise blue tone. Emily had accepted the job in New York, but negotiated to start only in 2 months, giving her time to organize the transition at the studio. Amanda would take over the business with help from a young apprentice they had recently hired. Meanwhile, her relationship with Gabriel flourished like the season's flowers. Now that they no longer hid their feelings, they allowed themselves small public displays of affection, holding hands while walking through the square, a quick kiss when saying goodbye at the studio, dinners at restaurants where everyone could see them. The town, of course, commented. Some approved, thinking they made a beautiful couple. Others, led by Mark and his group of friends, continued spreading malicious rumors. But Emily discovered she no longer cared so much about what they said. There was a security in her relationship with Gabriel that she had never experienced before. It was during one of those perfect spring days that something strange happened. Emily was at the studio, working on an antique vase, when Amanda entered hurriedly with a worried expression. "Emily, you need to see this," she said, extending a local newspaper. On the front page, a striking headline: "Torres Group plans luxury resort at Fisherman's Beach." Below, an image of Gabriel shaking hands with a man in a suit, both smiling at the camera. "Fisherman's Beach?" Emily repeated, incredulous. "But it's an environmental preservation area. And it's where I grew up, where my parents had that little summer house." Fisherman's Beach was one of the last natural refuges in Seal Harbor, a protected area where traditional fishing families still lived and worked. It was also the place where Emily had spent her childhood summers, before moving permanently to the town. It says here that the project includes a 5-star hotel, golf course, and private marina, Amanda continued reading the report, and that it already has preliminary approval from City Hall. Emily felt her stomach sink. How could Gabriel be involved in something like this? He, who always talked about preserving the town's authenticity, who criticized the uncontrolled development that threatened local charm. "There must be some mistake," she said, more to herself than to Amanda. "Gabriel wouldn't do this." "The photo doesn't lie, Emily," Amanda replied gently. "I'm sorry." The rest of the day passed like a blur. Emily tried calling Gabriel several times, but it always went to voicemail. She sent messages that weren't answered. The feeling of betrayal grew with each hour that passed without news from him. At the end of the afternoon, when she was already closing the studio, she received a message. "Can we meet? I need to explain." That was all it said, without apologies, without justifications. She replied with a simple, "Where?" and received as response the address of his grandparents' beach house. Intrigued and still hurt, Emily took a taxi there, arriving when the sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky with orange and pink tones. Gabriel waited for her on the porch, his hair tousled by the wind, his face tense with an expression she had never seen before. "Explain," was all Emily said as she approached, without hugging him, without kissing him, maintaining a physical distance that reflected her emotional state. "It's not what it seems," he began, a cliché that only increased her irritation. "It's exactly what it seems, Gabriel. You're planning to destroy Fisherman's Beach to build a luxury resort. The same beach that you know means so much to me. The same fishing community that you always said you admired for its authenticity." Gabriel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she already recognized as a sign of frustration. "The report is distorted. Yes, there was a meeting with investors interested in the project. Yes, City Hall gave preliminary approval. But I haven't given my final consent. I was just listening to the proposal, as I do with dozens of others every month." Emily wanted to believe him, but the photo in the newspaper told a different story. "You were smiling, Gabriel, shaking that man's hand as if you had closed a deal. It's corporate politics, Emily. Smiles and handshakes don't mean anything in the business world." She crossed her arms, feeling the cold afternoon wind give her goosebumps. "And why didn't you tell me about this? Why did I have to find out from the newspaper?" Gabriel hesitated, And Emily realized she had touched the crucial point. "Because I knew how you would react," he finally admitted. "I knew you would be upset, and rightly so. I wanted to have all the facts, all the alternatives before discussing this with you." "Alternatives?" she repeated, confused. Gabriel invited her to sit on one of the porch benches, and after a moment of hesitation, she accepted. "The resort project is just one of the proposals for that area," he explained. "For years, City Hall has been trying to attract investments to revitalize the region, as they say, which really means expelling traditional fishermen and turning everything into another generic tourist attraction." Emily nodded. She knew this story well, repeated in so many coastal towns. "If I simply refused to participate," Gabriel continued, "another investor would take over the project. Someone without connection to the town, without concern for its real impact. So I decided to play the game, pretend interest, buy time." "Time for what?" "To develop a counter-proposal," he replied, a gleam of determination in his eyes. "An alternative project that preserves the fishing community, that values their traditional knowledge, that brings responsible tourism without destroying what makes that place special." Emily felt a spark of hope but was still cautious. "And this alternative project, does it really exist or is it just a vague idea?" Gabriel stood up and entered the house, returning moments later with a folder full of documents. "See for yourself," he said, handing her the folder. Emily opened it and found plans, drawings, financial projections, everything elaborately detailed. The project proposed creating a community-based tourism cooperative, where the fishermen themselves would be guides and hosts. It included restoration of traditional houses, creation of a small museum about local fishing culture, and a market for direct sale of seafood products. Everything planned to have the minimum possible environmental impact. "This is incredible," she murmured, leafing through the pages. "But is it financially viable?" "Yes, although the return is smaller and slower than the resorts," Gabriel explained. "The problem is convincing the company board and shareholders. They only see numbers, not cultural or environmental value." Emily looked at Gabriel with new eyes. She had judged him hastily, assuming the worst without giving him a chance to explain. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" she asked, her voice now softer. "Because I still wasn't sure if I could make it work," he admitted. "I didn't want to promise something I might not be able to deliver. And also," he hesitated, "I feared you would think I was doing this just to impress you." Emily couldn't help but smile. "And aren't you?" Gabriel smiled back, that sincere smile she loved so much. "Maybe a little," he confessed. "But mainly because it's the right thing to do. Because that place deserves to be preserved, not just for the memories you have of it, but for what it represents to the entire community." Emily felt the last barriers of distrust crumble. She stood up and approached Gabriel, touching his face tenderly. "I'm sorry for doubting you," she said quietly. "I understand why," he replied, holding her hand. "I should have been honest from the beginning." "Yes, you should have," she agreed. "Promise there will be no more secrets between us." "I promise," he said, sealing the commitment with a kiss. When they separated, Emily still had a question. "And now? How are you going to convince everyone to accept your alternative project?" Gabriel sighed, looking at the sea that was beginning to reflect the first stars of the night. "It's going to be quite a battle. I'll have to use all my influence, maybe even risk my position at the company. But if it works," he smiled, hugging her by the waist, "it will be a victory for the town, for the fishermen, and for us." "For us?" she repeated, intrigued. "The little house where you spent your summers still exists," he explained. "I thought maybe we could restore it. A place for us to stay when you come from New York on weekends." Emily felt her heart fill with emotion. The idea of restoring her childhood home, of having a piece of her history preserved and shared with Gabriel, was more than she could have dreamed. "That would be perfect," she whispered, hugging him tightly. That night, as they returned to town under a starry sky, Emily reflected on how true love isn't the one that never faces obstacles, but the one that finds strength to overcome them together. And for the first time in a long time, she felt she had found exactly that. What she didn't know was that the real test was still to come, when Gabriel would have to choose between his principles and everything his family had built over generations. The following weeks were of intense activity. Gabriel worked tirelessly on his alternative project, meeting with community leaders, environmentalists, and small local entrepreneurs to form a coalition of support. Emily, in turn, divided her time between preparing her move to New York and helping however she could, using her contacts in the art world to give visibility to the cause. News of the project leaked to the press, and soon Seal Harbor was divided. On one side, those who saw the luxury resort as an opportunity for economic growth. On the other, those who defended preservation of traditional culture and the environment. It was amid this tense climate that the decisive meeting of the Torres Company board occurred. Gabriel presented his alternative project, defending it with passion and concrete data. But he faced strong opposition, mainly from his own father, who had returned from Milan especially for the occasion. "This is sentimentalism, not business," Richard Torres argued, his cold voice echoing through the meeting room. "The resort project will bring 3 times greater return in half the time." "But at what cost?" Gabriel countered. "Environmental destruction, cultural loss, displacement of families who have lived there for generations?" "Progress always has a price," Richard replied with disdain. "If your grandfather had thought like you, this company wouldn't exist today." The mention of his grandfather hit Gabriel like a physical blow. He knew his father was wrong. His grandfather had always valued tradition and respect for local communities. It was his father who had transformed the family company into a money-making machine at any cost. The vote was close, but in the end, the board decided to proceed with the original resort project. Gabriel left the meeting devastated, knowing there was only one option left: use his veto power as majority shareholder, something he had never done before, and that would certainly create an abyss between him and his family. Emily found him that night at his apartment downtown, a modern and minimalist place that contrasted with the welcoming personality she had discovered in him. "It didn't work," he said as soon as he opened the door, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. Emily hugged him in silence, offering comfort without words. They sat on the balcony, watching the city lights while Gabriel explained the meeting details. "What are you going to do now?" she finally asked. Gabriel took a sip of the whiskey he had served for both before answering. "I have a nuclear option," Gabriel finally said, swirling the glass between his fingers. "I can use my veto power as majority shareholder. Technically, I have that right. But it's never been used in the company's history." "And that would stop the project?" Emily asked, feeling a spark of hope. "Yes, but it would also create an unprecedented crisis. My father would probably never forgive me. The board would lose confidence in my leadership. It could, in the long run, even lose control of the company." Emily absorbed the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just a business project at stake, but Gabriel's entire relationship with his family and his legacy. "What does your heart say?" she asked softly. Gabriel looked at the horizon where the city lights met the darkness of the sea. "That some things are worth more than money or power," he replied with a certainty that surprised them both. "That I can't be complicit in destroying something so many people value, including myself." "Then you've already decided," Emily stated, not as a question, but as recognition. "I think so," he smiled sadly. "I'm just trying to gather courage to face the consequences." Emily held his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Whatever your decision, I'll be by your side," she promised, even from New York. The mention of her imminent departure hung between them like a cloud. Only 1 week remained before Emily started her new job. The timing couldn't be worse. "I wish you could be here when everything explodes," Gabriel admitted. "I can postpone the move," she immediately offered. "The museum would understand." Gabriel shook his head, determined. "No, absolutely not. We've already delayed your start by 2 months. I won't let my problems interfere with your career." "They're not just your problems," Emily argued. "I also care about Fisherman's Beach, about the people who live there." "I know," he smiled, caressing her face. "And that's exactly why I need to resolve this alone. To prove to myself that I'm doing this for the right reasons, not just to impress you." Emily wanted to protest, but understood what he meant. Gabriel needed to make this decision based on his own convictions, not influenced by her presence. "When are you going to do it?" she finally asked. "Tomorrow," he replied, clear decision in his voice. "The sooner the better. There's no point prolonging the inevitable." That night, they stayed together in Gabriel's apartment, talking little, just enjoying each other's presence. There was an intensity in their touches, in their gazes, as if both felt they were on the verge of a transformation that would change everything. The next morning, Gabriel dressed in an impeccable suit, preparing for the battle that awaited him at the company headquarters. Emily watched him from the bed, admiring the determination that radiated from him. "You look like a warrior preparing for battle," she commented, trying to lighten the tension with humor. Gabriel smiled, adjusting his tie. "I feel more like Don Quixote fighting windmills." "But the windmills you face are real," she replied, getting up to help him with his tie. "And what you're defending is worth the fight." When he was ready to leave, they kissed long at the door, as if it were a farewell. "Call me as soon as it's over," Emily requested. "I promise," Gabriel replied, touching her face one last time before leaving. The following hours were of anguishing weight for Emily. She tried to concentrate on work at the studio, but her mind was with Gabriel, imagining the storm he would be facing. It was in the middle of the afternoon that her phone finally rang. It was Amanda, not Gabriel. "Emily, you need to come to the cafe now," her friend said, her voice urgent. "Gabriel is here, and he's not well." Emily ran to the cafe downtown, her heart pounding in her chest. She found Gabriel sitting alone at a back table, an untouched cup of coffee in front of him, his gaze lost. "Gabriel?" she called softly, sitting across from him. He raised his eyes, and she saw something she had never seen before, a mix of deep pain and relief, like someone who lost something valuable, but also freed himself from a great weight. "It's done," he said simply. "I used the veto. The resort project is officially canceled." Emily held his hand over the table. "How was it?" "Exactly as I expected. My father was furious. He said I was betraying the family legacy, throwing away years of hard work. The board was in shock. Some members threatened to resign." "I'm sorry," she said, squeezing his hand. "Don't be sorry," Gabriel replied, a small smile appearing on his lips. "For the first time in years, I feel free, like I finally made a choice that was genuinely mine, not what they expected of me." There was a new light in his eyes, a quiet certainty that wasn't there before. "What happens now?" Emily asked. "I'll probably be removed from the presidency, at least temporarily. My father is already mobilizing the board for a motion of no confidence." "And the alternative project?" "That's the positive side." Gabriel smiled more openly now. "Several community members have already expressed interest in collaborating. And surprisingly, some smaller investors like the idea of a sustainable tourism project. Maybe I don't need Torres Company support after all." Emily felt a mix of pride and admiration. Gabriel had risked everything for his principles and was still standing, ready to move forward. "You're incredible, you know," she said, leaning to kiss him softly. "No," he replied when they separated. "I'm just trying to be the man you deserve." In that moment, in an ordinary cafe in downtown Seal Harbor, something was sealed between them. A silent understanding that no matter the distances or obstacles, they had found something rare and precious in each other. Summer arrived with its intense heat and cloudless sky. Seal Harbor prepared for the traditional sea festival, which would mark the end of another cycle. Emily had moved to New York almost 3 months ago. Her work at the museum was exactly what she dreamed of: challenging, prestigious, full of opportunities to learn and grow. But no professional success filled the void of being away from Gabriel. They maintained daily contact by phone and messages. He had visited her 3 weekends, exploring together the museums and restaurants of the big city. She had returned to Seal Harbor only once, for Amanda's birthday. It wasn't easy, but they were making it work. The love they felt for each other seemed only to grow with distance, as if physical separation forced them to build an even deeper connection. Gabriel had been removed from the presidency of Torres Company, as he had predicted, but kept his shares and a seat on the board. Surprisingly, this had given him more freedom to dedicate himself to the Fisherman's Beach project, which advanced slowly, facing bureaucracy and resistance, but gaining growing community support. Gabriel's grandparents' house was being restored, as well as the small beach house where Emily had spent her childhood summers. They were parallel projects that symbolized the future they imagined together. A future built with respect for the past, preserving memories but creating something new and meaningful. It was on the eve of the Sea Festival that Emily returned to Seal Harbor, surprising Gabriel. He wasn't expecting her until the next day, and when he saw her standing at his apartment door, With a small suitcase and a radiant smile, he was momentarily speechless. "Surprise," she said, opening her arms. Gabriel hugged her so tightly that he lifted her off the ground, spinning her in the small entrance hall. "I thought you were only coming tomorrow," he said when he finally put her down, still keeping her in his arms. "I managed to leave early," she explained. "I didn't want to miss a minute of our weekend." That night was one of reconnection. They dined at home, talking about everything that had happened in the weeks since they last saw each other. Emily told about the impressive Renaissance art collection she was restoring. Gabriel shared the advances in his community project. "I have a surprise for you," he said while they savored dessert on the balcony under a sky dotted with stars. "What?" Emily asked, curious. "You'll find out tomorrow at the festival." No matter how much she insisted, he kept the mystery, changing the subject with an enigmatic smile every time she tried to extract more information. The next morning, the town woke up in celebration. Colorful flags decorated the streets, the smell of typical food filled the air, and musicians prepared in the small squares. The Sea Festival was beginning, exactly 1 year after the encounter that had changed their lives. Gabriel insisted they go to the historic lighthouse after the main event, the traditional regatta of decorated boats. Emily agreed, intrigued by the mystery. The lighthouse was at the highest point of the town, offering a stunning view of the bay and the festive streets below. When they reached the top, after climbing the spiral staircase, they found the place deserted. Gabriel had clearly planned everything for them to have privacy. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with golden and pink tones. In the distance, fireworks celebrated the end of the regatta, their booms muffled by distance. "Exactly 1 year ago," Gabriel began, holding Emily's hands, "I saw you in that cafe, facing your past with courage. And in that moment, something changed inside me." Emily smiled, remembering that day, how everything seemed impossible then, how she never would have imagined being there, a year later, completely in love with this man that life had placed in her path. "It was the most important day of my life," Gabriel continued, "because it was when I really started to live, not just exist. You taught me about courage, Emily, about integrity, about not being afraid to fight for what you believe in." "You taught me to trust again," she replied, feeling tears form in her eyes. "Not to let the past define my future." Gabriel released her hands for a moment, just to search for something in his jacket pocket. A small blue velvet box. "This last year hasn't been easy," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate ring with a single pearl. "We faced doubts, distance, difficult choices, but each obstacle only strengthened what I feel for you." Emily felt her heart beat so hard it seemed like it would come out of her chest. "It's not a diamond," Gabriel explained, taking the ring from the box. "Diamonds are beautiful, but formed under extreme pressure, forced to transform. This pearl arose slowly, layer by layer, like our love. It's imperfect, unique, born from resistance and patience." With slightly trembling hands, he held her left hand. "Emily Matthews, would you give me the honor of marrying me? Of building together a life that honors both our roots and our dreams?" Tears now flowed freely down Emily's face. All the path they had traveled, all the doubts and fears they had overcome, culminated in this perfect moment. "Yes," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I want to." Gabriel slipped the ring on her finger, a radiant smile illuminating his face. When they finally kissed, the last ray of sunlight illuminated the lighthouse, enveloping them in a golden halo, like a silent blessing. Down below, the town continued celebrating, oblivious to the moment unfolding at the top of the lighthouse. But for Emily and Gabriel, the world had been reduced to that small space, to that perfect instant where past and future met in a promise of love. "How are we going to make this work?" Emily asked when they finally separated, her forehead resting against his. "With my job in New York, yours here." "We'll find a way," Gabriel replied with the quiet confidence she so admired. "Maybe we can alternate for a while, some months here, some there. The Fisherman's Beach project is advancing. Soon it won't need my constant supervision." "And your father? Your family?" "We're slowly reconciling," he explained. "I think my father finally understood he can't control me. And surprisingly, that improved our relationship. Emily looked at the ring on her finger, the pearl catching the last rays of sun. "I never imagined it would end like this," she confessed. "When I came to Seal Harbor, I was running away, looking for a place to hide, not to find love." "Sometimes we find exactly what we need when we stop looking," Gabriel replied, embracing her. "Or as my grandfather would say, destiny has a peculiar sense of humor." They stayed there, embraced at the top of the lighthouse, until the first stars appeared in the sky. Below, the festival lights shone like star reflections, creating a magical connection between sky and earth. "Shall we go down?" Gabriel finally suggested. "Our friends must be waiting to celebrate." "Let's go," Emily agreed, intertwining her fingers with his. "I'm ready for any adventure as long as we're together." As they descended the lighthouse's spiral staircase, Emily thought about how unpredictable life was. A year ago, she was determined never to fall in love again, to keep her heart protected by high and impenetrable walls. Now those walls had crumbled, and in their place grew something much stronger. A love built on trust, respect, and the courage to be vulnerable again. Gabriel, in turn, reflected on how Emily had transformed him. From a calculating and controlling man, trapped by his family's expectations, he had become someone capable of risking everything for his principles, of finding strength in vulnerability, of loving without reservations. Together, they had discovered that true love doesn't erase the past, nor promise a future without challenges. True love simply offers a hand to hold while we navigate life's uncertain waters, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, but always, always in movement, like the sea that cradled their town. 5 years later, the small beach house was filled with light and music. Friends and family gathered to celebrate the 3rd birthday of little Sophia, daughter of Emily and Gabriel. Fisherman's Beach had been transformed. The traditional fishermen's houses now displayed vibrant colors, carefully restored to preserve their original architecture. A small museum told the community's story, and tourists walked respectfully through the sandy streets, guided by the residents themselves. Gabriel's project had been a greater success than anyone could have predicted. It hadn't only saved the community from demolition, but transformed it into a model of sustainable tourism that was now being replicated in other coastal towns. Emily divided her time between New York, where she still worked at the museum 3 days a week, and Seal Harbor, where she had established a small restoration center that trained young people from the community in historical artifact preservation techniques. Gabriel had reconciled with his father, who now, surprisingly, was one of the biggest supporters of the community project. The Torres Company had reoriented itself towards sustainable investments, discovering there was profit to be made also in respecting the environment and local cultures. Amanda, now married to a local artist she had met at the studio, continued managing the business Emily had started, expanding it to include a small art gallery. Mark had left town years ago after his bar failed. They said he now lived in a big city, trying to start over. Emily sometimes thought of him, not with resentment, but with the understanding that some people enter our lives only to teach us difficult lessons, preparing us for true love when it finally arrives. As Sophia blew out the candles on her cake, surrounded by the love of so many people who had become an extended family, Emily and Gabriel exchanged a knowing look over their daughter's head, a look that said everything words couldn't express. Gratitude for the path traveled, happiness for the present shared, hope for the future they would still build together. The sea remained there, constant in its movement, silent witness to their intertwined lives. Sometimes calm, sometimes rough, always present, like the love they had cultivated, day after day, choice after choice. And when, later that night, they walked hand in hand along the beach, with Sophia asleep in her father's arms, they knew with certainty they had found the true meaning of home. Not a place, but each other, and the small miracle they had created together. If this story touched your heart, share it. True love deserves to be told, the kind that is born between storms, grows with respect and flourishes in the courage to choose every day to build something beautiful together.